U.S. Customs and Border Protection is the largest federal law enforcement agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security. It is charged with regulating and facilitating international trade, collecting import duties, and enforcing U.S. regulations, including trade, customs, and immigration. CBP is the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. It has a workforce of more than 45,600 sworn federal agents and officers. It has its headquarters in Washington, D.C., while its primary mission is preventing terrorists and terrorist weapons from entering the United States. CBP is also responsible for apprehending individuals attempting to enter the United States illegally, including those with a criminal record, stemming the flow of illegal drugs and other contraband, protecting United States agricultural and economic interests from harmful pests and diseases, and protecting American businesses from intellectual property theft. Organization overview. CBP has a workforce of over 58,000 employees, including officers and agents, agriculture specialists, aircraft pilots, trade specialists, mission support staff, and canine enforcement officers and agents. More than 21,180 CBP officers inspect and examine passengers and cargo at over 300 ports of entry. Over 2,200 CBP agriculture specialists work to curtail the spread of harmful pests and plant and animal diseases that may harm America's farms and food supply, cause bio and agro-terrorism. Over 21,370 Border Patrol agents protect and patrol 1,900 miles of border with Mexico and 5,000 miles of border with Canada. Nearly 1,050 air and marine interdiction agents prevent people, weapons, narcotics, and conveyances from illegal entry by air and water. Nearly 2,500 employees in CBP revenue positions collect over $30 billion annually in entry duties and taxes through the enforcement of trade and tariff laws. These collections provide the second largest revenue for the U.S. government. In addition, these employees fulfill the agency trade mission by appraising and classifying imported merchandise. These employees serve in positions such as import specialist, auditor, international trade specialist, and textile analyst. The primary goal of the CBP K-9 program is terrorist detection and apprehension. The CBP K-9 program is critical to the mission of the Department of Homeland Security to protect the homeland. The program conducts the largest number of working dogs of any U.S. federal law enforcement agency. K-9 teams are assigned to 73 commercial ports and 74 border patrol stations throughout the nation. There are 327 officially designated ports of entry and an additional 14 pre-clearance locations in Canada, Ireland, and the Caribbean. CBP is also in charge of the Container Security Initiative, which identifies and inspects foreign cargo in its mother country before it is to be imported into the United States. Major offices operating under CBP: the Air and Marine Operations, headed by Assistant Commissioner Randolph D. Alice; the Office of Border Patrol, headed by Chief Michael J. Fisher; the Office of Field Operations, headed by Assistant Commissioner Todd C. Owen; the Office of Administration, headed by Assistant Commissioner Eugene H. Sheed; the Office of Congressional Affairs, headed by Assistant Commissioner Michael J. Yeager; the Office of Information and Technology, headed by Assistant Commissioner Charles R. Armstrong; the Office of Intelligence, headed by Assistant Commissioner David J. Glaw; the Office of Internal Affairs, headed by Assistant Commissioner Matthew Klein; the Office of International Affairs, headed by Assistant Commissioner Charles E. Stallworth; The Office of International Trade, headed by Assistant Commissioner Brenda B. Smith. The Office of Human Resources Management, headed by Assistant Commissioner Linda Jackster. The Office of Public Affairs, headed by Assistant Commissioner Philip J. Lavelle. The Office of Technology Innovation and Acquisition, headed by Assistant Commissioner Mark S. Borkowski. The Office of Training and Development, headed by Assistant Commissioner Christopher J. Hall. CBP assess all passengers flying into the U.S. for terrorist risk via Joint Terrorism Task Force and systems such as Advanced Passenger Information System, United States Visitor and Immigrant Status Indication Technology U.S. Visit, and the Student and Exchange Visitor System SEVIS. CBP also works with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to screen high-risk imported food shipments in order to prevent bioterrorism, agroterrorism. Through the Container Security Initiative, CBP works jointly with host nation counterparts to identify and screen containers that pose a risk at the foreign port of departure before they are loaded on board vessels bound for the CSI is implemented in 20 of the largest ports in terms of container shipments to the U.S., and at a total of 58 ports worldwide. The Secure Electronic Network for Travelers Rapid Inspection Program allows pre-screened, low-risk travelers from Mexico to be processed through dedicated lanes. Nexus is a similar program on the country's northern border with Canada. Along both borders, CBP has implemented the Free and Secure Trade, which utilizes transponder technology and pre-arrival shipment information to process participating trucks as they arrive at the border. An agreement with Canada allows CBP to target, screen, and examine rail shipments headed to the U.S. Structure: Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner, Office of Air and Marine, Office of Border Patrol, Office of Field Operations, Office of Administration, Office of Congressional Affairs, Office of Human Resources Management, Office of Information and Technology, Office of Intelligence, Office of Internal Affairs, Office of International Affairs, Office of International Trade, Office of Public Affairs, Office of Technology Innovation and Acquisition, Office of Training and Development. Enforcement powers. CBP has the authority to search outbound and inbound shipments, and uses targeting to carry out its mission in this area. Under Section 596 of the Tariff Act, CBP is required to seize and forfeit all merchandise that is stolen, smuggled, or clandestinely imported or introduced. CBP is also required to seize and forfeit controlled substances, certain contraband articles, and plastic explosives that do not contain a detection agent, in conjunction with the Department of State and the Bureau of the Census. CBP has put in place regulations that require submission of electronic export information on U.S. munitions list and for technology for the Commerce Control List. CBP uses advance information from the Automated Targeting System and the Automated Export System to identify cargo that may pose a threat. CBP also works with the Departments of State and Defense to improve procedures on exported shipments of foreign military sales commodities. Merchandise may also be seized and forfeited if its importation is restricted or prohibited because of a law relating to health, safety or conservation. The merchandise is lacking of federal license required for the importation. The merchandise or packaging is in violation of copyright, trademark, trade name, or trade dress protections. The merchandise is intentionally or repetitively marked in violation of country of origin marking requirements, or the imported merchandise is subject to quantitative restrictions requiring a visa or similar document from a foreign government, and the document presented with the entry is counterfeit. Civil penalties. Section 592 of the Tariff Act of 1930 is the basic and most widely used customs penalty provision for the importation of goods. It prescribes monetary penalties against any person who imports, attempts to import, or aids or procures the importation of merchandise by means of false or fraudulent documents, statements, omissions or practices concerning any material fact. Penalties may be applied even in situations where there is no loss of revenue. Section 592 infractions are divided into three categories of culpability, each giving rise to a different maximum penalty. Fraud, an act or omission done intentionally to defraud the United States Department of Revenue. The maximum civil penalty for a violation is the domestic value of the merchandise in the entry or entries concerned. Gross negligence, an act or omission with actual knowledge of or wanton disregard for the relevant facts and a disregard of Section 592 obligations. The maximum civil penalty is the lesser of the domestic value of the merchandise of 4 times the loss of revenue. If the infraction does not affect revenue, the maximum penalty is 40% of the dutiable value of the good. Negligence, involving a failure to exercise due care in ascertaining the material facts or in ascertaining the obligations under Section 592. The maximum civil penalties are the same for gross negligence, except the lesser of twice the domestic value of the merchandise or twice the loss of revenue is used. The penalty cannot exceed 20% of the dutiable value. The Customs Modernization Act amended Section 592 to apply existing penalties for false information to information transmitted electronically and allows Customs to recover unpaid taxes and fees resulting from 592 violations. It also introduced the requirement that importers use reasonable care in making entry and providing the initial classification and appraisement, establishing a shared responsibility between customs and importers, thus allowing customs to rely on the accuracy of the information submitted and streamline entry procedures. To the extent that an importer fails to use reasonable care, customs may impose a penalty under Section. U.S. Customs Agriculture Specialist officers are allowed to issue civil penalties in accordance with CFR 7 and AMP 9. Criminal penalties. In addition to the civil penalties, a criminal fraud statute provides for sanctions to those presenting false information to customs officers, with violators facing a maximum of 2 years imprisonment or $5,000 fine, or both, for each violation involving an importation or attempted importation. History. U.S. Customs Service responding to an urgent need for revenue following the American Revolutionary War. The first United States Congress passed, and President George Washington signed on July 4 the Tariff of 1789, which authorized the collection of duties on imports. 4 weeks later, on July 31, the Fifth Act of Congress established the United States Customs Service and its ports of entry. For nearly 125 years, the U.S. Customs Service was the primary source of governmental funds, which paid for the nation's early growth and infrastructure. Purchases include the Louisiana and Oregon territories, Florida, Alaska, and Washington, D.C., funding the National Road and the Transcontinental Railroad, building many of the United States' lighthouses, and the U.S. military and naval academies. In March 2003, the Customs Service was dissolved to form part of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security as the Bureau of Customs and Border Protection and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Division, U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. Shortly after the American Civil War, some states started to pass their own immigration laws, which prompted the U.S. Supreme Court to rule in Keelung v. Freeman in 1875 that immigration was a federal responsibility. The Immigration Act of 1891 established an Office of the Superintendent of Immigration within the United States Department of the Treasury. This office was responsible for admitting, rejecting, and processing all immigrants seeking admission to the United States and for implementing national immigration policy. Immigrant inspectors, as they were then called, were stationed at major U.S. ports of entry collecting manifests of arriving passengers. A head tax of 50 cents was collected on each immigrant. In the early 20th century, Congress's primary interest in immigration was protecting American workers and wages, the reason it had become a federal concern in the first place. This made immigration more a matter of commerce than revenue. Hence, in 1903, Congress transferred the Bureau of Immigration to the newly created Department of Commerce and Labor. After World War I, Congress attempted to stem the flow of immigrants, still mainly coming from Europe, by passing laws in 1921 and 1924 limiting the number of newcomers by assigning a quota to each nationality based upon its representation in previous U.S. Census figures. Each year, the U.S. State Department issued a limited number of visas. Only those immigrants who had obtained them and could present valid visas were permitted entry. President Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the Immigration and Naturalization Service from the Department of Labor to the Department of Justice in 1940. Reorganization CBP became an official agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security on March 1, 2003, combining employees from the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service, and the United States Customs Service. This transformation was led by former Commissioner Robert C. Bonner. Ralph Basham was nominated to the post of Commissioner by President George W. Bush on January 30, 2006. Basham had 28 years of experience as a law enforcement manager, including serving as the head of the Secret Service and the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. He had also served as the Chief of Staff for the Transportation Security Administration. It is the largest federal law enforcement agency that works closely with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Drug Enforcement Administration, and Federal Bureau of Investigation. In 2007, the U.S. Border Patrol joined two units, the Border Patrol Tactical Unit and the Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue Unit, to form the U.S. Border Patrol's Special Operations Group, headquartered in El Paso, Texas. BORTAC and BORSDAR direct the nationally dispersed assets from SOG, providing the U.S. Border Patrol with immediate tactical and emergency response assets.